Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, starseeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Third Eye Awakening. I've been sitting on this one for a while because we didn't get to record the Patreon bonus that we were supposed to record. Just our schedules did not meet up, and I just kept waiting, but it's time to release this beautiful episode because I had such a great conversation with this guest, Debra Silverman. She is an astrologer, a psychotherapist, and a spiritual guide, and she's basically here to bring hope to those experiencing collective pain. So Debra feels very passionately about the climate crisis that is standing in the foreground. So she brings the wisdom of the elements and astrology to the table to uncover solutions for our times that we're living in and just, all the things that are up in the air. She is the author of The Missing Element, Inspiring Compassion for the Human Condition, which is published through Find Horn Press. And she is the founder of a school that has trained more than 4,000 people in astrology. Debra is madly in love with astrology. Where she was once a skeptic, she now believes in the wisdom of astrology as an undeniable, dependable, and healing balm for society as we face post-pandemic life and a climate crisis. For Debra, astrology is the medicine. While there is no one-size-fits-all approach, Debra Silverman has developed a unique psychological spiritual model, and she connects with each person she practices with on a deeper level in order to empower them to their full potential. I really enjoyed this conversation with Debra. We got into her spiritual awakening journey, and it was truly fascinating. And we connected on some, common viewpoints or viewpoints that we had in common that I really wasn't anticipating going into the conversation. So I think you're really going to enjoy this one. I'm super bummed that I can't deliver on, you'll hear me in the podcast. I was like, it was kind of before I had tweaked my scheduling thing. So we ran up against her time limit, and it was a bit of a miscommunication, but it was really my fault as the podcast host. But anyway, you'll hear me teasing what I wanted to record for the Patreon bonus. But unfortunately, like I said, our schedules just weren't able to connect. So I don't have that particular Patreon bonus for you. But of course, I still have a Patreon bonus because I love you all and I love the Patreon community. P.S. I feel like I should really give a shout out. I haven't done this yet. I hope you'll all forgive me. It's kind of bad form and I'm a little bit embarrassed by it, especially when I listen to other people's podcasts and they give such beautiful shout outs to all their patrons. And I feel a little bit ashamed that I have not done this yet. But please know that every time I don't do these things, it's genuinely because I'm up to my eyeballs in young children. And it's just, I'm in the grind, truly in the grind of life. Actually, embarrassingly, last night, after 3 very suboptimal nights of sleep in a row, basically where William wakes up about every hour or so, I kind of lost my cool with him last night at 4 a.m. and just, lost my patience and said something that I'm really ashamed of and made lots of apologies. And I don't know why I'm sharing this here, I guess because I'm just still processing it, and to let you know, I'm so very human, guys. I am not a perfect person, and I don't think any of us are required to be perfect people, and life is hard sometimes. Life is real. Please don't get any ideas that I live a life of luxury and a silver spoon up my butt. My house, my life, the rhythms of my life, the realities of my relationships look like everybody else's. And I suppose I'm saying this part because I just feel like there is an epidemic of Instagram-based comparison, whether you're even on Instagram or not, but there's just lifestyle influencers, that whole realm. And I'm not saying people shouldn't even do that. I think that there's a place for that, but we just have to be so careful that we don't get this idea that like other people are doing a better job at lifing than we are. I'm not always doing a great job at lifing is my whole point, but total tangent. Really what I wanted to say is that I have currently 76 patrons and I'm so thankful for all of you. I can't even begin to tell you what it means to me. I'm not going to read out all because then my thing will be way too long. But I'm not going to read out all of the names right now simply because 76 of them would take too long. But let me read a few. Maybe I'll just do that. I'll work through the list and I will read a few of the names so that I can just give you all some love and appreciate you. And I can invite more of you to join. I'm really working on, I'm revisiting my sort of working model. And I want things to be accessible to as many people as possible. I want there to be like exciting luxury items or luxury, like my Akashic readings. I mean, I cannot price those lower than they are priced, even though I'm sure some of you think that they are like, it's highway robbery, but truly like, I just can't, I can't survive off of, it's too much. It takes too much out of my crown. I cannot, I can't fill my day with like 8, 9, 10 readings to be able to price them lower, to be able to make my ends meet. But there are other things that I love creating that I want to make more accessible. And I'm endeavoring to do that through Patreon. So I would love to have your support. If it feels aligned for you, I would love to come to have you come over and join. There are so many different tiers to join at. Different tiers get different things. The lowest one is only $5 a month. And the brilliant thing about Patreon that I really, really love is that you're not locked in. Like you can pay for a year in advance if that's your jam. And if that is your jam, thank you. I love you. But you don't have to. So you can cancel your Patreon account or your Patreon membership whenever you feel like you need to because, I know things change. Life changes. So I'm going to give some love right now. I'm going to call out a couple people. Kate Hassey, James Selkirk, Megan Wallace, Trish B, hey girl, what? Alexandra Awada, Ali Haddocks, Kendall Johnson, Jillian Freeman, girl, Amber Pearson, Alex Wright, Laura Heyer, hey girl, and Starly Sawyer. I love you, Starly. I am so thankful for all of you. That is just some of the people. And just know that you are basically contributing to my ability to keep this podcast going and keep it ad-free, which is something I'm really working on. I keep going back and forth. Should I put ads on? Should I not? I don't want ads on. I don't like listening to ads myself. So that's kind of how I want to keep it. And so I really appreciate all of your patronage, those of you who have joined. And I would love to invite others among you to join and just keep an eye on it because it's moving in exciting directions as we go into 2023. Okay, that's it for my long ass ramble. Oh, I guess I should say too, I meant to put this on the last podcast, but because I have 2 children and they were both sick and William was not only sick with a bad cold and a bad cough, but he was also teething. He was getting one of his front incisor teeth and his first molar all at the same time. Poor little guy. That's why I feel so bad that I kind of had like not my best mom moment last night. But it also means that I did not get this advertisement or whatever, this little snippet recorded to go on the intro for last week's podcast when it was really relevant. But at this point, when this episode comes out, I have already hosted a masterclass on the New Age false light deception, wherein I went really deep about some big revelations that I have personally experienced about the insidiousness of the deception of the New Age movement and what we need to be aware of and how to develop increased discernment. In this episode, like, I'm really candid about things that I wish I had not talked about, things that I think that I have like inadvertently, accidentally contributed to this false light deception. I also talk about like how kind of intensely ungrounding or destabilizing it felt to have my eyes opened at a whole new level to the deceptions in the New Age movement. Even though I really didn't consider myself New Age, it still applies to the things that I have created over the last couple of years, the spiritual movement, if you will. And I also name some names, and I don't do it to character assassinate or shit on anyone because I haven't met these people. So, obviously, like, I can't do that. But I do use examples of people who, when I engage with their content, I see the red flags, I see the danger zones, I see the insidious, dangerous messaging. And I really, really want to share this with as many people as possible. I did that free episode on my podcast on October 14th called The New Age False Light Deception. So there is a free version, but I also turned this into a paid masterclass, which you can access at the $33 a month level on Patreon. But you can also purchase the replay if you for whatever reason don't want to go through Patreon. You can spend an extra $11. It is $44 for the masterclass itself, and you get lifetime access to the replay, so you can watch it as many times you want, take as many notes as you want. But I did this one behind a paywall because I go into names, and I just think it's like poor form to just like slander people and like throw their names around on the internet and levy accusations, which isn't really what I did anyway, but it's nonetheless, it could be perceived that way. And so at least behind a paywall, it's a little bit more like you have to self-select to, receive this information. But ultimately, it feels really important for me right now to talk to people about discernment and talk to people about the ways that we are being sort of lulled into a state of hypnotized complacency where we think that we are doing good things. We think we are advancing and evolving when in fact we are buying into some shiny sort of feel good, but ultimately empty, dead light ideas that take us out of our power and really take us out of the game, take us out of the fulfillment of the whole purpose of this incarnation we've chosen for ourselves or that we find ourselves in. So if you want that information, unfortunately, like I said, I was not on top of it enough to record this intro before the masterclass, but you can still purchase the replay and it's still every bit as valuable. Most of you had to watch it as a replay anyway because, schedules and whatnot makes it hard for people to always join live. Okay, that's it. Without any further ado, here is a beautiful conversation with Debra Silverman. Please know that I absolutely love and adore you, and I hope that you enjoy. Everyone, I have Debra Silverman with me today to talk all about astrology from her beautiful perspective. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. Debra, welcome to Third Eye Awakening.
Thank you.
Can you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what brought you to become interested in astrology and what your spiritual awakening journey has been like?
Such a great question. Let's see. So I'm both a therapist. I have a master's in clinical psychology and an astrologer. And my awakening happened at 15 years old. It's so crazy. I was so young. I was at the dentist, which is funny because I had dental work this week and I'm very sore, but unrelated. I was 15. I went to the dentist and had nitrous oxide for a cavity. My mom was in the room because you weren't allowed at that point to be that young and have nitrous on your parent. And I went out of my body. It was like a near death experience. I saw my body at a distance. I went way up and out. And the next thing I knew, I was without an ego, did not know my name, couldn't remember what I was about, except that I had this exalted feeling of like complete transcendence and noticed that time went on in every direction without limit. And it was a little scary for a 15-year-old. I realized that this was not what we thought it was. I had a very direct experience of the other side and I was captured. I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And when I came back, I had tears running down my face. And the dentist was like, uh-oh, did I hurt you? And I was like, oh, everything is nothing. You don't understand. This is not what you think it is. This reality is an illusion. And he was like, what? And I turned to my mom and I was like, I couldn't find you anywhere. And I didn't even know, but I completely felt safe and I felt more elated because I really did have a near death experience. And then the dentist, lucky for me, turned to my mom and wrote down on the prescription tablet, Michigan Metaphysical Bookstore. Take your daughter to this bookstore. And I was like, we didn't know what the word meant. Like the what? So fast forward, a year went by. We didn't go. My mom didn't. What's the Michigan Metaphysical Bookstore? A year went by and I came back to the dentist. Now I'm 16 and I drove myself this time. And the exact same thing happened. I went up and out of my body, only this time it was like a longer, sustained visual and downloads and being directed. And I was now 16 with this direct experience of this reality has multiple dimensions. And why are we so identified at this plane of existence? So I came down once again, told the dentist, this time I couldn't sleep and I couldn't eat because it was like falling in love with the other side. And I went to the Michigan Metaphysical Bookstore, told the lady at the counter, she gave me a book that I didn't understand a word of. It was called Three Magic Words. I skipped to the back of the book and it was, I am God. And I was like, huh? It totally went beyond my 16-year-old brain. But from that moment on, I always knew that this reality was a very single dimension that did not include the highest realms. And so it then freed me up. It gave me like almost like Teflon, like nothing really hurt, nothing really stuck because I always knew that the storyline was just captured by our mind and that there was another reality where this was an exercise of learning. Like I totally got that, but it was not the truth, as in absolute. So it was a very profound, and that was, so I was 16 and had already found, mm, I had our bells went off. I'd already found astrology when I was like in the teenage years. So I think what happened to me was that my soul's mission and destiny was very directed because I found astrology so young and I found this truth that this reality was not what we thought it was with a lot of comfort. And that freed me up from taking everything so serious and and even though I was a practicing therapist for almost 40 years, and I really take gently what people say, and I love to hear their stories, I know as an esoteric astrologer, which is eventually what happened, that all of your stories is just grist for the mill. It's the polishing device that facilitates the ability for us to go between dimensions. And we're not very good at it, but it's much popular now with microdosing and people like you doing third eye exercises and chakras and past lives. This conversation has become very popular. So at the time when I was little, I was completely weird.
Yes. That story is so amazing, like so amazing. I'm very familiar with nitrous oxide because I used to work as a midwife. So that was one of our first pain management tools in hospital during births. And then I also had it at the dentist. I did not have an out of body experience, but I remember being like, this is amazing. But what an incredible awakening experience. And it sounds to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as you're describing it with the understanding that there is an extended reality beyond this, that this one is, we view it through the lens of narrative and that it's not the truth, however. It's like a set of circumstances set up for us to experience limitation and understand ourselves through those circumstances, but that there is something much greater. When you were describing like falling in love with the other side and just not being able to engage in your regular like human maintenance activities for a little while afterward, I wonder if it resonates with you that you tapped into the Christ consciousness field. Um,
100 Yes, 100%. So I wouldn't say that this isn't real. I wouldn't say that this reality isn't real. There's multiple realities and
Yes.
they coexist and they're all real. The difference is the consciousness of what I was told then and what is still true now is to your point, exactly your point, that this is a workout. We're in like a gym, like we're in the 24-hour gym, 365, where when life comes in and stalks you with a circumstance that is so compelling and so distracting and so emotional and so mean or so exciting. It's so distracting. There's nowhere no way to get out of this experience because it's such an intense, gravitational, thorough, sensual world that it's hard to distinguish. And yes, this reality is real, and there's so many others.
Yes, I have found the exact same things. I love the words that you used, compelling. I like when I'm reaching for those words, I'm like, it's bewitching, beguiling. It's like such an immersion. It's an immersive experience where you're exactly, it's so sensual and everything feels so real. And I agree, it is real. And yet it's not the only real. That's the thing that we're working on collectively understanding now is that it's not the only real.
I think what's so cool about astrology, which is my deepest love above everything else, is the consistent and thoroughness of that system brought to us by clearly a very high intelligence. So it is the closest we get to the other worlds looking at the stars. And it is the bridge maker. So I have been obsessed. I have a school twice a year, the doors open, and I literally teach people simple bite-sized bit ways to look at your chart and go, "Oh, obviously I'm here. Now the question is, what was my agreement? What did I come to do? What was this promise that I made?" And that's what the chart does. So I'm obsessed because the system is like impeccable.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So you said that when you had this experience, or at least when you were 16 and you had your second experience, you had already discovered astrology. How did you discover it?
You know what? Once again, it's a fated, determined moment. I was 10, the very first time I ever saw the word, and I lit up like a Christmas tree. And I didn't know what it meant, but I went and ordered from the comic strip in Detroit. The Detroit News had in the comic area, get your chart. This was like 1967. And then fast forward, that didn't work because they sent me the wrong chart. It was very funny. But then when I was in high school, probably seventh, eighth, ninth grade, junior high school, I got a book called Your Moon Signs. And every one of my friends, because I was super popular, that little Gemini girl. And
Mhm.
and to this day, I'm still friends with all those kids and I know all their moons. So that was the book came in my hands. I became obsessed. It was just, if you would have put a piano in front of a musician's hands when they were little, and they started playing piano and you'd be like, "What made you?" And they were so good at it. I was a prodigy. I knew astrology the first time I ever looked at it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in like astrology was my entrance into this world as well. I would say my spiritual awakening didn't start until I was about 18 in earnest, but when I was 15, 16, 14, 15, 16, I was very interested in astrology and beyond the L and YM magazine little horoscopes. Like I wanted to know. I was practicing drawing the zodiac and memorizing all the glyphs and the cardinal signs and the fixed immutables. But there was a point where my my astrology literacy hit a plateau and I knew that I can understand it to an extent, but it's not actually my gift to perfect and share in the world. And I'm in such profound admiration for those who can look at a chart and decode it because it is truly a language. It's like when you get into the different aspects between planets that they're making together in a natal chart, never mind like comparing it to today's current chart. Like there's it just gets deeper and
I
deeper.
make
So
it so simple. When you study with me, I make it very simple and exciting. It's in bite-sized bits. It's just 6 weeks, 2 hours each week with a group of 10 women in a circle, and your chart comes on the screen. And then people learn exactly what you just described, the aspects, the houses, the signs, the modes. And I make it like a 6th grade level. Like you come in to start with. By the time you finish, if you really get captured and you want to be an astrologer, we get to university level. But I start in a very simple way. And people, I feel like a drug dealer because they get so addicted.
it's so fascinating, right? Because first of all, I think most of us are deeply interested in ourselves. And when we start to learn about all of our intricacies at the level that
other people haven't been able to witness and reflect back to us at a conscious level. It's so validating to learn these cool little details about yourself. And then when you filled your tummy on your own information, it's so fascinating to start diving into other people that's just like it is addictive.
And the cool thing about my school, which I'm so proud of, because we've taught all over the world, the hundreds and thousands of people, is the quality of consciousness that happens relative to what we started with, this ability to go between dimensions. You can't get the rocket fuel to give you permission to go to altered states and to high levels if you don't know yourself back at the ranch. So my job is to give people grounding. And astrology, surprisingly, even though it's about the stars, is very grounding. Like it's so solid, it's so stable, it's so dependable, it's so consistent. And then once you have that internal backdrop of, yeah, I definitely know who I am. And this is my calling to be like for me, astrology, it's in your chart. I'm looking at your chart. It's in your chart too, that you had Uranus and the sun. It only happens once a year. You were born under a very particular moment, and Uranus rules astrology, and it's very pronounced in your chart. So you being open to Uranus rules everything that's non-traditional, that's outside the box. So astrology and metaphysics and principles that are not limited to the left brain's demand. You've got a much more open right brain going, hold on a minute. Let's just think bigger than this and outside the box. So that indicator, and that's what happens when you look at someone's chart. You go, listen, you're built for fill in the blank, and everyone will get the answer. And it's, you can imagine the fulfillment for me in watching people who know nothing. They come as complete novices, not even what you know, the little bit, and then they leave speaking the language.
Yeah, I imagine that it's so fulfilling. And for me, like one of the things that drives me the most when is the figuring out of our soul purpose or our soul mission, like the reason that we incarnated. And I imagine
Like the most important question in the whole world.
right? Like, why are we here? Come on. And I imagine it must be so fulfilling for you to be able to look at somebody's chart and articulate that and see the penny drop for them and have them be like, oh my God, this is what I'm made to do.
And then I get gifts sent to me in the mail and love letters. Husbands call me and say my wife is back. And it is, it's because it's the stars. Like we are so bound to this physical plane, and this is where pain exists. And this is where gravity ruins everything. That's funny as far as growing older and watching our bodies go, gravity. So when you can get to the higher realms in a shortcut, and then begin to understand those questions, everything gets into it's a wonderful perspective. It brings life back.
Absolutely. Something that I'm interested in understanding is like you say that you're a psychotherapist. Are you a practicing psychotherapist and do you combine astrology in your practice?
So I am no longer a practice. I was for 35 years, and my school is all based on psychology. So Carl Jung was quoted to say, psychology will be a dinosaur science until it includes astrology. He was an astrologer, Carl Jung. So you can't really yes, every single session I ever did, I always had a chart. So did Carl Jung. I never ever did a reading or a session without a chart, as I am right now looking at yours. And I've trained many women on my site. There's 20 certified astrologers that I've trained who are really good and they've gone through a rigorous training to get to that. So they are including the psychology of astrology. It's not just will I meet a tall, dark, handsome man, and how many kids will I have and when will I die? Those are questions that people used to ask astrologers. This the system that I do is tell me who, just what you said, tell me who I am, why am I here, what is my purpose, what's my life lesson, and what's the timing on my chart? What cycle am I in? How do I facilitate God's will when I understand the stars? I can certainly help spirit, life, call it what you will, have its way with me.
I'm thinking about it and I'm like, my God, it would be so sad. It would like back when you were practicing, it just would have been so satisfying to be one of your clients or patients and to come with your psychological issues, the things that you want to get deeper therapy for and to feel so seen.
Which is why my practice was, and this is part of what's happened. Like I was a very successful psychotherapist and really helped people. It wasn't because of me, it was because of the astrology, because I could get right to the bottom note and say, hey, you're not supposed to be a salesman. You promised you would be a writer. And then he goes, "Hmm, I knew it. Or you're not supposed to be a businesswoman. You came in as a mother. Why are you arguing with yourself?" So people get given permission to come
Mhm.
back to their true self. And yes, to your, oh my God, are you kidding? It's the most, I've had the best job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I
It's
believe
like
it.
being a waitress and knowing exactly what everybody wants to eat, and you get to the table without them looking at the menu, and they're like, "How did you know I love mayonnaise? How did you know to hold cheese?" Your chart.
So, or you're in like, it's not a big deal. I'm just magic. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. That's the other angle, right? Of course, you can. But really, honestly, the level of magic that is inherent in those stars, it gives me all the faith in the world because I am obsessed with the climate crisis. I just did a keynote recently. I'm obsessed. And I've collected all these scientists and Jeff Orlowski, who wrote Chasing Coral, who everyone must watch, and Chasing Ice. And he also did Social Dilemma. He's a friend of mine. And I really got to see that the planet is in dire straits and we are at the end of a cycle and we are going towards a brick wall. And why can't we just say that out loud? And the question is psychologically, astrologically, what do we do?
Yeah. So, what is your perception of climate change and the cycle that we're in?
First of all, it's called climate crisis. It's no longer a change. We're in the long view, said the astrologer. This has been predicted. We've gone through, count them, 17 ice ages on planet Earth. So since conception, since Earth became entity, this is not the first up and down energetic we've gone through. Cycles go this way, and we are going towards a heating cycle. The planet is going to really heat up. It will be unbearable because the water system, this is human influence, the ocean will be destroyed by 2050. There'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish. So there's no debate about this. If you do any research about the fish, and you'll come up with that. No one wants to talk about it. Of course, I just happen to always tell the emperor his balls are hanging out when he's walking down the street. I don't know. I'm the one that have to say to everyone, is that really true that he has no pants on? But I seem to be the one that says this shit. But the good news is there's a miracle waiting to happen, and it could be beyond my understanding as what happened in my original awakening. You begin to see that this reality, while it may seem like we're isolated and we're alone, there are protectors, there's guides, there's ETs, there's a host of angels in your house right now who love you. So we're not alone. We're not going to be left here alone. If the planet is going to go through this transition, exasperated by the human condition and our appetite for consumption and greed and fighting, which is what apparently humans love to do, then we're probably going to have to go through, not probably, we're going to go through a big change. The question that should be asked is, what can I do to help? And that is a lot of things from growing trees in your backyard, which is what I just did, to getting out of your car and riding a bike, which I have electric bikes. I don't drive my car at all if I don't have to. Considering your diet and making sure that there's an organic and then that there's regenerative agriculture is the answer to the future. There's a lot of things that will have to happen. And if you, the listener right now, would just be interested to say this question, one, how do I make myself safe? What will that take? I'm not going to answer it, but you must. I always tell everyone, please be curious. Don't stick your head in the sand and pretend. It's so funny. We're all walking into this unbelievable era as though we're sleepy. That's why everybody drinks coffee all the time. That's my theory.
I think that part of the reason that we proceed with a level of it does appear like willful blindness is because we're enmeshed in this system that I believe we participate in and yet is not of our like the end by our the average little person's creation. And the system is so hard to extricate ourselves from. For instance, right now, I live in Canada. It's the height of summer, and we have berries galore that are grown seasonally, and we can buy them in those little recyclable cardboard cartons, which is wonderful. And once the season is over, if we want berries, we're back to buying them in those goddamn plastic things. And I have two little children, a 1 year old and a 4 year old, and they love berries and they're so healthy. So I want to buy them berries and give my children berries. And I don't want the damn plastic thing, but it's all these little ways that you feel
But
so swamped. And so it's, I think, like cumulative effect is that a lot of us just we feel overwhelmed and we end up in a state of inaction because we don't it feels so gigantic that we don't even know what to do.
And it's not your fault because the operating system of the human brain cannot tolerate certain things. So we, for example, if you see an accident, you cannot not look at the accident. You cannot drive down the street, there's an accident, not look, impossible. Just the same way, if I say to you the word death, I know you're a birth doula, but the opposite death, people run. They run miles out of the way to never talk about it. So we have instinctual hardwired operating system that prevents the brain from knowing what to do. And that's real. It's no one's to blame. Everyone's guilty. We all suffer from the same bells are going on. We all suffer from the same limitation of the operating system that exists in the human psychology. Now, having said that, can you wake up inside the dream? Can you ask yourself very clearly, what is it that I can do with these berries? Should I go up to the counter and say, is there a way you guys can get recycling? They may say no, but your effort, your continual concern can't just stay inside of anxiety. That's what the planet is suffering right now from this word that I never heard until the last 10, 15 years, anxiety. We never had that word.
Probably surely people felt anxious though, but it just
It,
wasn't a word.
it wasn't a popular like now, of course they did. But now it is so prevalent between 5G and the vibrational energetics. We live with a high grade anxiety as though that was the norm. Like I have tinnitus. I hear it ringing in my ears all the time. That's a symptom of, I don't even know, except to say, I can make you 6 different options of what it could be. The point I'm making is there is a particular zeitgeist right now that is living with fear, depression, anxiety, inadequacy, low self-esteem, feeling lethargic and depressed. And there's a collective illness we have. So when we ask, what can we do? It's like, how do I get up in the morning and have the get up and go to go fight a fight around the unconscious mind when there's no directions how to fight, let alone possibilities to win? So I'll just go buy those berries with the plastic on it and I'll think about it, which will create anxiety, but I can't seem to get the grocery store to consider there is an alternative to that.
Yeah, I do see alternatives. For example, in my area, I live in a rural area, so I'm surrounded by farms, which a lot of them are small family run farms with more traditional agricultural practices. And we have an online farmers market year round. So I'm able to order the majority of my groceries locally and seasonally, and they make all the effort to reduce waste, which is really nice. So I believe that there are
Beautiful.
solutions, but I think that's what happens is we get overwhelmed and so then we continue just sleepwalking. But I would love to come back to something that you said about how we're not alone here and there are benevolent beings, guides, ETs, a host of angels for each of us surrounding us. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I started out this business as an Akashic Records reader. I don't do it so much anymore because I have young children. But that is exactly what I found is that we are surrounded by benevolent beings and that we're so incredibly supported every step of the way. And yet, because this is a realm where free will is like the exalted, that's what allows this realm to be what it is, free will. It means that they can't interfere. They're here, but we really have to invite their assistance. And how have you found this to impact your perception and your experience with the climate crisis that is so prevalent for you in your consciousness?
Such a great question. First of all, in no uncertain terms, I know that we're being watched. And I had a direct experience in one of my woo-woo experiences that I hardly ever talk about. But by the way, I went to school in Toronto, so I know Ontario. But back in those days, many years ago in the 70s, I had a direct experience through a dream state of a council that I'm part of. And the council was intergalactic. That was a second alternate reality that happened for me that made the entire difference of the rest of my life because I was only in my 20s. And because of that, I saw that they were trying to figure out what to do I was on a council where other entities and planets were also under stress. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, hold on a minute. So there's multiple dynamics of evolution that occur at every level of reality. And in the name of evolution, everything goes in waves. That's what astrology teaches us. Everything is cyclical. It's a spiral. It continues to go up, but it is certainly circular and it is certainly repetitive. And so it becomes the question of the climate is in a cycle. This is not to be said that something's wrong. The humans have exasperated it, definitely. There's just last week, we went to 8 billion. So there's a lot of us here, and we're consuming, and we're unconscious, and we throw things away. There's a lot of waste, and the waste becomes an issue, not to mention the heat of our cars and airplanes. So we're contributing, and there's not much we could do if we didn't have legislation. This is what Jeff taught me, that the government's not in support of changing. Now, you can do everything you can do, just like you're doing it. Having an organic farmer or a local farmer who you buy food from is the answer. In my consciousness, knowing the angels are here, there's councils where there is distress and there is working out. I know that my function personally is to keep my system so clear and to meditate daily and to really create an opening for them to talk to me. So I've created a relationship, and I can say this to you. And I saw what your podcast was about. I got so excited. I was like, look, someone I can actually be real with, because everybody wants to talk about astrology. Astrology is given to us by the ETs. Nobody could have come up with a system that's airtight, impeccable, 100% perfect without an incredible influence of intelligence and masterminds and unfathomable levels of consciousness. So why would we doubt, said the astrologer, that this is the climate crisis, the psychological crisis, the environmental, the political is not a symptom of evolution? Like, nothing's wrong. It's if you saw a woman giving birth and you'd never seen it before, you would think, oh my God, bad operating system. What is going on with her stomach? This is terrible. She's screaming, she's throwing up to start with. Can't get out of bed. Then she ends up in this last few hours looking, honestly, she's dying. And that's not true. That's just the mind's construct because you've never seen it before. So what if we had the ability to be wise midwives and said, I know that we're being watched, we're being loved, we're being held, we're being protected. And this is an evolutionary cyclical moment, as every day is. The sun comes, the sun goes down, the moon is full, the moon is not. It's like so predictable, it's so consistent and so beautifully reliable. So while you may be worried and anxiety and fear, and I went through deep depression, when I first did the research on the climate, I was like, the not only does the guy have no pants on, the emperor, this entire movie's a joke, but there's nobody even telling him he had no. I couldn't believe nobody was talking about climate. And then I realized, oh, this is a symptom of evolution. And part of our operating system doesn't know how to stand face to face with death. We're just goofy little things. We're cute, but we're goofy.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And so, do you believe in the Kali Yuga? Do you feel like this is part of the Kali Yuga?
of course, that's exactly what I was just saying. So everything goes in cycles. Kali Yuga goes in cycles of 24,000 years. We're in the end of a Kali Yuga. And this is Kali. Kali is the death. So we are, yes, of course. This is, if I had my way, I would be wearing a wizard's hat and I would in a team of 12 other wizards, and we would just be doing the calendar again. Like the Mayan calendar was developed, we would do an updated calendar. And I would say, listen, you guys, this is, we probably have 10 years at the most of this reality. Your children will not, this is why I hate talking about it. Your children will not have a reality that resembles this one.
Oh, I know they won't. It's really interesting. Actually, like maybe a month ago or 6 weeks ago, I felt these spirit babies in my field, which I don't, it's not normal for me, but I felt this collective. And so I just decided to do a channeling and I was like, whoever's supposed to hear it will be there. And it was a group of beings. They identified themselves as being lion beings, and they were letting me know that they're coming in to take the torch for the next phase and that they will not be subject to the amnesia that so many of us are. And so basically they were a bit sassy. They were kind of like, we know what we need. We're in charge. You did a good job with what you were able to do, all of you, but we know more than you and just defer to us. Everything's going to go easily, much more easily if you just defer to us because they're primed and ready for the world that
You're way ahead of us. Did you see Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind?
you know what? I haven't actually seen that.
Amy.
Okay.
Well, we finish this tonight, and you're going to put the kids to bed. You and your husband are going to watch Stephen Greer, Close Encounters of the Fifth, and everything's going to change because
Okay.
exactly what you just said. is exactly what's true. There, of course, we're being watched for doing this podcast because I haven't been able to talk about this. And I'm just getting my muscles to be the whistleblower. First, it was hard enough talking about climate crisis, and I was getting Debbie Downer as my nickname. Now I've got a new message. Like, I've always known that astrology was brought to us by a higher intelligence. That's not debatable. What I didn't know till I watched the films and saw his interviews, and I've really taken a deep dive now with the ET conversation. There are good guys. I knew it from that original contact I had with the council at that young age, which was visceral. It was not, it was a very real dream that I will never leave behind because it was so real. It's just that we are so inhibited. For some reason, we want to think we're the center of the universe, and we once thought the earth was flat and everything revolved around us. Now we think our minds are trustworthy. They're not. Announcement: do not trust your mind.
And so do you feel like you defer to trusting your heart?
Good question. Yes, I live in my heart
Yeah.
and I am madly in love. I am devoted. I am like every breath I take in this reality. I know this is a timeline. I know we're peaking right now. I know this is the best of the best. This is how kings and queens lived. I live in Hawaii. I'm looking out my backyard. I can't believe the gift I have of this tropical land. I don't take it for granted for 1 minute because I know we're just moving through a cycle. And by the way, we are peaking. This is the best life you've ever had, the most convenient, the most advanced human life besides certainly Atlantis. And we are walking into a transition that pretty likely there's a chance there'll be enough of us. You're doing your work by having this podcast. The people listening are opening their minds, but it's a 50-50 road right now. Will we destroy ourselves in the transition of this evolution? Or will we wake up before the alarm and say, let's prepare?
I honestly think it's going to be a little bit of both. To me, what I see now, I hadn't thought about this too much since last year, but I was on somebody else's show yesterday and he asked me the question. And so last year, I was really seeing like a bifurcation of timelines, that there are some souls here that are, they're just not ready to leave this experience of reality that we're in, but the majority of souls are ready. But some of them are going to jump ship like at the last moment. Like their wake up is going to be like as proverbial fireballs are falling from the sky. And I'm not saying fireballs are going to fall from the sky, but just to
You could assume that because I live in Colorado and there are fireballs blowing. The heating up of the planet will include fire. So that's real.
Wow. Another message that I got recently that I'd love to pass by you and see if this resonates with you at all is that this was a weird one that I got in February, but it was that Gaia has already ascended. She is already, it's so hard to describe this because there's this whole Dolores Cannon New Age body of work that is woven into the vocabulary. And that's not, I'm trying to not refer to that, but essentially it was like the consciousness of Gaia has already left her 3D body. And I actually don't even believe we're in the 3D anymore. I think we're in the 3D, but we're actually in the fourth dimensional narrative realm. So we're just in like a simulation based around our narratives. And that's where we're air quotes trapped. Like we need to, as you said earlier, wake up within the dream. Like we need to resolve our narratives and liberate ourselves from the perception that we are who we think we are and that our dramas are the real. And when we liberate ourselves from that, and we pass through the portal in our hearts and become like heart centered beings, it connects us in a new consciousness grid from the horizontal heart plane and lifts us up to where Gaia is currently residing. And that her physical body, or the one that we understand as being her 3D body, is going to go through a regeneration process. And so we're not really going to live there, air quotes. It's really hard to describe in English language, but I wonder if any of that
Makes
makes
sense. That what you're talking about is just like in a dream state, your dream body has the capacity to go places and to change form and to do the weirdest things, fly. The same is true of the earth. The earth, now, of course, Gaia knew and knows that there's too many people here. They're eating her up. They're destroying her. They're wrecking her. They're taking her waters and ruining it. They're changing the temperature. She's aware. So it's one. Did her dream body exit stage left? Possibly. That would not surprise me. Two, will she survive? Absolutely. For a time, The coral is gone. I don't know. People don't know this. When you do the research, 85% of the coral on Earth is gone. That is the first ecosystem to go because the coral is how the food on all the fish around the world eat. So now we are limited as far as the temperature and the ecosystem. And that is not a surprise that Mother Earth is her water element, her emotional body, her ability to regulate her natural rhythms are all gone. So would she go somewhere else to create a semblance of health and create her necklace? So if you know you're dying and you're an advanced being, you create another alternate world where you start another form. So that would not surprise me at all what you just said. Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
you go.
I was just going to say that it also feels to me like just as we exist across multiple dimensions, so does she. And she, one of the things that I find difficult or challenging when I'm trying to articulate these things is that it can sound like, oh, we're physically going to go on spaceships or something and go to a new world. And maybe that's the case, but that's not how I perceive it. I perceive that when my physical body dies, my consciousness still continues to exist and manifests itself in the other dimensions. And each dimension has its own characteristics of how my consciousness will manifest and does manifest there. As I'm currently in those other dimensions. And so I understand Gaia's consciousness is also currently in those other dimensions. And she's like, when I say that she's left her 3D body, she's also participating and making herself inhospitable, like running a fever and saying, no, we're done with this. You're not.
I don't know if she's doing it, but she's certainly being affected by the raising of the temperature. She does have a fever. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, similar to when we run a fever, it's in response to an
that's right. To the
invading.
host. The host is
Yeah.
responding to the bacteria or the cancer. Look at us. We're growing at the speed of light. We're everywhere. We have taken over her ground, her land, her breath, her production, her fruits, her food. We've changed the nature of the soil. Crazy. We're such a crazy species.
Aren't we? And the thing is, we don't have to be this way. Like, it's not a requirement for us to exist on Earth that we live in the way that we do.
It's just a knee jerk response. It's a built in operating system. So when you become conscious and you start to use your third eye and you start to meditate, there is an alternate world that comes into form, just like what I saw at 15. And then the bridge, and you are a bridge maker, the bridge between that world and this world, and well worn bridge. Like I can go up and I can come down. I pay my taxes. I clean the house. I go up. I meditate. I look at the stars. I tell people who they are. Come back down. I got to take the kid home. I got to drive him to school. Come back. Like it's like a yo-yo, like whoa. And mastery in this plane of existence is consciousness, which is what you've got plenty of. This is why astrology is so important. How do I have a language to speak to the word compassion? Because that's going to be the single ingredient that will change our narrative. If I have compassion for me, that I just seem to be this. My nickname when I was a kid was Debbie D. I've just always been that person that asked, excuse me, I know you believe in God and we believe, but can you tell me who created God? Maybe, oh God, you have to ask those questions, Deborah. So I was since I was born, it's funny to think about the level of my appetite to ask the hard questions. Now that's called consciousness. And the distinguishing factor for those of us that will make it through this transition and those that won't is the ability for us to be with what is, stay awake, do what's required, honor the four elements. I have a book called The Missing Element. And the subtitle for the book is Inspiring Compassion for the Human Condition. If I can the missing element, of course, it's water, air, earth, and fire. But there's this single ingredient called, wow, it is so complicated down here. This place is so dense. And you can't, it's like you got to hit yourself, but you have to go to bed every night for 8 hours and to get a break.
Legitimately. It's
Funny.
true. And I love what you were saying about the mastery and bouncing back and forth. I was literally I have a mastermind about the application embodiment of the Christ consciousness, although I am in no way proclaiming that I am in mastery of it. But I know that is the direction I'm being called, is to apply it and embody it. And we were just talking yesterday about how the challenge of this is toggling back and forth, being in the human and tending to the things that are required of us in this embodiment. I see us as like undercover agents. Like we're bringing a certain frequency of consciousness, but we have to be in human form. Otherwise, we would be like those spirit guides and ETs and angels that need to wait to be asked and invited. But when we're in the human body, we're anchoring it in at the tissular level, the cellular level, the DNA, the molecular, atomic, and subatomic levels. And we're recoding this. To me, it translates as a hologram. We're recoding the hologram through our consciousness. And so we were talking yesterday about the challenge of toggling back and forth between those higher realms of consciousness and then, gotta make time for the kids. Gotta go pick my daughter up at summer camp. Gotta take the vehicle in for an oil change. It requires mastery.
I really like it. It took me many years because I'm a Gemini and I resisted and I always said I wanted to go home. And I always told everybody I got pushed on the bus. I didn't really volunteer for this. I always felt like somehow, I remember living in Toronto in those days when I was in the 70s, so cold and going to university and just thinking, oh my God, this place. And then something had to do with moving to Hawaii. But then as the years have gone by, I find that elevator of multiple dimensions one of my favorite things to do. Let's go in the elevator.
Go in the
And when I was a
elevator.
kid, my brothers and I, we used to go in the we'd go to a hotel, we would ride the elevator. That's what I feel like I do now.
It's true. And it is fun. It is actually fun to do it. It requires it. It is a level of mastery. And again, I'm not proclaiming that I have mastered it at all, but it is
It
really
is
fun.
only fun. It's only fun when you emotionally can manage anxiety, depression, sadness, and trauma. And that took me. So I would say to you, mastery, and I also have a mastermind that people are just going to be invited to this new year. When I take those women, I did it last year, 10 women through a year with me and watch the change. When you can see the skill set required to dance between those worlds. And then people start is the same thing with my school. And then they start doing it. And then you're like, did I just give them the code? Are they doing it? And looks a lot happier in this room.
I bet it's an amazing mastermind. I could just imagine. I think you have really powerful codes to share with people just in this 50 minutes that we've been talking. I have two questions for you before we wrap up this main show. And then, do I have some questions for you for the bonus Patreon show? But my questions for this show are I would love to, just out of curiosity, because your nickname was Debbie Deep, but you are a Gemini sun sign, and Gemini, my daughter's a Gemini, and I think of butterflies, like they flit and they just have this huge expansive feel, and they flit and they land and they go off again. So what is your moon and your rising sign that makes you Debbie Deep?
It sounds funny you say it. My moon is in Aries and I'm Libra rising, but I have a sun in the eighth house. So I have a very strong Scorpio. My North Node's in Scorpio and my Neptune and my ascendant is in Scorpio. So I have a very scorpionic nature.
Yes, that's what I associate with deep too, is that Scorpio energy. Okay, thank you for indulging me with that and my curiosity. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about is just about the elements, your book, The Four Elements, and that
Book called
compassion.
The Missing Element is the
The
name of the book.
missing. Okay, the missing element. Can you share with us how, if people are drawn to read this, like what this encompasses? I know you touched on it, like the four literal earth elements, and then the human compassion. But what is the code that is carried in here? What is what?
Very simple. It's so simple. There's no astrology in the book as in zero. And I did that deliberately. It is simply, there's four different personality types. We can't live without this ancestral indigenous values of the four elements. I live in Hawaii where I study hula and everything's based on the four elements. So the book, you take a test in the book and you figure out what your missing element is. And then you go read that chapter and you balance the vehicle. There's four wheels on a car. If you imagine you're going through life in a car, a vehicle, and one of your wheels is down, the whole thing goes off. So basically, I'm just teaching people how to balance and how to get to a really healthy lifestyle. And if you're missing an element, which you probably don't know right now, but you would at the end of the book, you would then introduce that missing element in a way that cultivates an enhanced evolution of your own psyche. And the next thing, magic begins.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. That's so valuable. I personally am going to be myself ordering your book as soon as
And
we're
you
done
can,
with the
if you
conversation.
order it from my website, I send you your chart and I sign it. If you order it from Amazon, you get the book. It's like in the tarot deck, the magician, the very first card of the tarot deck, number 1. 0 is the fool, because you got to be crazy to incarnate here. And then when you land here, the first stop is the magician. And he says, excuse me, can I show you these 4 elements? Because if you don't have these, you can't do magic. And then the next stop is the high priestess, the third eye. She says, everybody stop, put everything down, close your eyes, and can we meditate?
She's like the cosmic womb.
She's the source of everything. If we want to go in between on the elevator, the high priestess takes you on the elevator. And that's the first stop after you learn the 4 elements. And then begins the process of evolution.
Oh, I love this. I'm definitely can't. I'm going to order it from your website. Everybody go to Deborah's website. Well, I'm giving the show notes and go order yourself a copy of this book.
Everybody go. This is keep talking. Everybody go. You all have to wake up. We got to keep this planet alive and kicking, because we are not going to be here the only ones that are tickling ourselves all by ourselves.
And also, I was just in conversation with somebody yesterday, and even if Gaia's ascended and we're ascending with her, it's not a passive process. We all have to choose it. And we also, I remember Dr. Phil saying years ago when he was super popular and I would watch it, he would say to couples that were on the brink of divorce or they were cheating on each other or something, he would say, you can't just leave this relationship. You have to earn your way out. And what he meant by that, as I understood it, is like, you can't just think that you're just going to leave a person and leave all your problems behind and go start a wonderful new life with somebody else. You have to deeply explore yourself and take responsibility for your part in creating this reality for yourself. If you want to have any hope of creating a different, better, happier reality. And I think really that's what it comes down to is however this plays out in the evolutionary cycle we're in, we have to earn our way out of this problem that we've created. We have to show up and expand our consciousness and take responsibility and change our lives.
We have to.
Yeah. I think,
Do I have to?
yeah. Yeah.
I would listen to you, Mom, because you love me so much. I'm going to listen.
That's right. This conversation has been amazing. And so, everybody who's listening, the teaser is that you can bet on the Patreon bonus episode, I'm going to ask Deborah more about this experience of seeing and knowing herself as part of a council and her experience with ETs and stuff like that. So if you want to hear all the juicy good stuff, then join us over there. But this conversation was incredible. It went in directions I totally wasn't expecting. It was amazing. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and sharing your codes and your beautiful personality and your perspective with us.
You're so welcome.
And I love you, listeners. As always, thank you for the powerful currency of your attention. I do not take it for granted. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are, and I will catch you on the next episode.
Hey, my beautiful friend. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Third Eye Awakening. If you like what you heard and you want to go deeper, then head over to my website, amybelair.com, and check out my store, which is full of my past programs, courses, modules, masterclasses, light codes, etc. that are powerful and they are potent and they pack a punch. Not gonna lie, they are here to support you, accelerate you, and activate you in your spiritual awakening and psychic development journey. And/or if you want to stay in my most current, vibey, live energy, then I suggest that you head over to the Patreon and join me there. At the lowest tier level, which is only $5 a month, you get a secret bonus episode for every Third Eye Awakening episode that goes out. You also get a weekly energy report and light language activation, and you get a new moon and full moon emancipation transmission. So those are some fun ways to play, and I'll just remind you that I always have live programs going, so keep your eyes on my website, on my social media, and here on the podcast to find out what is the most current offering that I have. Either way, I love having you in my world, and I hope that I get to meet you and work with you soon.